Well, David Vos here, and this is a continuation of the video I just put out. Well, I said just before we stopped that video that they speak to me telepathically, and I was talking about some, there's been a lot of information going around the internet. There's been some people that have had some experiences, and there's a lot of confusion because you see what's happening is a lot of people are having experiences in different ways, because some of these beings, this has been the case ever since, for thousands of years. They want us to know about them. They want us to know and be enlightened and to grow and to have knowledge. But there's a predicament on this earth that is very difficult. And that is that there are creatures on this earth that are also advanced beings who are trying to keep us enslaved, and they're trying to keep us ignorant. And they're using us and misusing us and abusing us. Now, the good beings that the Bible calls the angels, or God, they're always trying to enlighten us so that we can not be abused, so that we can grow up and take our rightful place as children of our Father. And we're being enlightened, and everything is, this has been going on for a long time. When Jesus came to the earth, he enlightened the world and gave us knowledge. He sent forth his apostles. Now, the reason he sent them forth was to teach us. And Jesus talked about how we were to learn. Not only would we learn a few things and experiences from witnesses, from testimony, from certain individuals that were on the earth, who, by the way, were murdered for what they told the world, because there are some evil people that don't want you to know anything. They don't want you to be enlightened. And so they're trying to keep that knowledge away from you. And they're going to kill anybody who says anything. This is why I'm risking my life. Not only that, it's very embarrassing, because they've made it, in our world, they've made it very embarrassing. You're labeled a nut, a crackpot, crazy. See, but the apostles, they've used that. They've hijacked Christianity, and they've made you think it's some kind of spiritual, religious thing. But in reality, what the apostles learned was spoken to you in Greek and stuff, and it's been mistranslated. You don't understand what they're talking about. They're talking about angels, and we think it's some kind of fairy with wings, and it's just like today, this false information that's going around about how these advanced beings look like serpents, and how they're some kind of goofballs, right? That trying to fly around and crash their aircraft on the earth, and our amazing scientists are trying to figure out who they are, and they're dissecting them, taking out their hearts and stuff, and trying to back engineer their craft and stuff. This is ridiculous, friends. A lot of this is subterfuge so that we won't know the truth. So a lot of people that meet these creatures, if they saw a ship, any ship that's anywhere near this earth, a lot of times is not being, there's no advanced being in the ship. They're run by robots. They've got an entire group of sort of android beings that's what we're seeing when we're looking at these grays. So a lot of people, when they see this, they think that's what these creatures look like. Well, as I told you, I was living in Idaho at the time, and I was about 22 years old. I was out in the field there. It was a town called Bonner's Ferry. This is where I lived for many years. This is where my mother passed away. And this is up on the Canadian border. And there's a lot of trees there and beautiful mountains. It's a very beautiful place. My family doesn't realize that any of this has happened to me. And no, I don't think, and they're probably going to laugh, but so be it. I have to tell my story. It doesn't really matter anymore, because I really haven't seen my family in a long time. And I don't have a lot of people that's going to affect me in this particular way. But it doesn't matter, because I've got to tell the truth. This is the reason the apostles were given the truths and the things that they were taught, is to speak this and to teach and to enlighten. It's always the enemy that tries to keep us in the dark. Our Father in heaven wants us to know all of this stuff, and this is why he allows individuals to be contacted. The problem is that there's stories in the Bible, like, you remember when Daniel met the angel, and you remember how he was frightened, and he fell sick for 21 days? It's quite an experience when you come into contact with these beings. And I'll tell you what happened with me when I contacted this being and how it affected me. The same story goes with John, the Revelator. When he saw the angel, it says that he fell down, and the angel raised him up and says, don't faint. And so it's a very frightening experience. I was in a field there in Bonners Ferry, and I'd been praying for hours out there. I'd gone through quite a bit of things in my life, and I was very confused, and I didn't know what to do, and whether or not I should be religious, and what's the truth. I wanted to know the truth, so I was very sincere. I'd recently gone through quite an ordeal with my background and the organization that I was a part of as a child. They more or less shunned me and did some shenanigans and basically ruined my life, caused a lot of trouble in my life. My mother was very sick emotionally and eventually physically over it. It just really ruined and separated a lot of people in my family and messed up our lives. So I had quite a bit of emotional problems and a big disturbance going on in my life at the time. So I was in the field and I was praying, as sincere as I could be, and with all my heart praying. And I was out there for some time, and all of a sudden, I saw over a period of several days of praying out there, I saw different things. But at one point, I saw the only thing I can't describe it very well. I'm using words that others have used because it seems to fit pretty well. But they were more or less light orbs. That's what when they came down and landed, this is what it looked like. There were like hundreds of these orbs of light. And they came very fast out of the sky, sort of in my direction towards me. It frightened me so bad I fell on the ground and practically passed out. I don't think I passed out, but I was frightened. I couldn't move. My heart was pounding. Because I knew as soon as I saw these orbs of light that it wasn't normal and something was happening, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So there was you know how in the Bible it talks about pillars of light? That's what happened. There was a pillar of light that came down to the earth. It was an extraordinary pillar that I knew at that point something very extraordinary was happening. And I saw a light being. And to describe that, he was a man-looking being he was a white man, and he looked just like human white people look. And he was glowing. And he hovered over the ground. He didn't walk. And this is why I knew it wasn't just a regular human, because he was glowing white. And he was able to glow. And as he approached me, I was so frightened that I thought I was going to die. I really didn't know what was happening to my body. I literally couldn't move a muscle. I was paralyzed. And I remember thinking, just as this individual was approaching me, I remember thinking, he's going to speak to me. And I don't think I can bear it. You see, there's something going on. At that time, I didn't understand it, but there was something going on because the way that they speak to us, they're far more profound and advanced than we are. And so their thoughts come to us more or less telepathically. But I didn't know what was happening at the time. I knew he was going to talk to me, but I never heard anything out of his mouth. And so it took me a long time to realize that being communicated with me, but it was through a telepathic means. There was things that I knew after that experience that I didn't know before. And I didn't completely understand how I knew those things. But it was quite an experience. But what I'm telling you is that these beings do not look like these little grays that people are talking about. Those grays it was told to me that those are robotic androids that they put on some of these ships. So these advanced beings are very human-like creatures, but highly advanced technologically and spiritually. So after that experience, I thought I was going crazy. I thought about it every day for years, literally. I ended up basically not talking about it to anyone. I didn't talk about it to my family, and I never mentioned it to my father, or because I had communicated with my father for a little while after that. I never spoke about it to my nephews or my uncle or my stepfather or my mother or anything. But they began to communicate with me after that, telepathically, but they had a hard time because I wasn't aware of what they were doing. I couldn't understand how I would receive these messages, and I felt at times that the whole experience was so strange that I would just stop thinking about it and not pursue it. They told me that I was supposed to tell others. They told me that I was going to be sent out, much like the early apostles, to tell things to the world. But I rebelled. I did not want to do it because I knew everybody would laugh at me. Nobody would believe me. I'd be labeled a complete lunatic. And I didn't know who these beings were. My faith was not very strong in that sense because I was so confused because of the way I was taught as a Christian. I wasn't sure who these beings were. And so it took me a long time, and I prayed and prayed and prayed about it, and kept asking some way for them to help me to understand what was happening. And this has been going on. They've been working with me for many years now, until, like I said in the last video, about 6-7 months ago, they gave me a device to basically prove to me that they were communicating with me. Now, the device that they gave me is very similar to the device that many nations have used for thousands of years. Almost all, I think in some of my videos I've talked about how each nation had an oracle. Now, the Jews they had what they call an ephod, an Urim and Thummim. And they had an ephod, and it was a plate with stones on it. And this has come down to us today in some forms, different forms, like tarot cards, dice, dominoes. All of these things were parts and pieces of original oracles that were possessed by many different nations. Today, we don't know what dice are. We just play with them like it's a game. We use tarot cards. A lot of you don't realize that it's the same as the playing cards. Tarot cards has what is called the Fool. In modern deck of cards, they call it the Joker. And then there's the 4 suits, hearts and diamonds and stuff. And the way people, it's come some kind of spooky thing. Like, originally they were to speak and to communicate with other beings from other planets. But the superstition set in because of the Catholic Church. Pretty much downplayed anybody that communicated with these beings, killed all the apostles, and anyone after the apostles that had any communication, they were labeled as sorcerers and witches, and they were murdered. So they said that these contraptions that they had were satanic and evil, and if you played with any of this kind of stuff, you were labeled a witch and a sorcerer, and they would burn you at the stake. So today, these things have become just games, and people don't know what they are. They just play games with them. And so we have the playing cards. They're called playing cards because even though they're the same thing as a deck of tarot cards, nobody knows how to use them anymore. So we just got this relic, and we just call them. Well, we just play with them. Now we take the dice and we just play a game. See, but the dice was the same as the Urim and Thummim that they had, and they played a part. They were stones that were on a plate. It's like most games today have a card or a plate, a cardboard plate, and then you throw the dice on it and where it lands and stuff like that. And some of them have little things like this in the middle. Well, one of the things that they did with these original things was communicate.